Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. I'm your host, James Gardner, certified athletic therapist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, yoga instructor, human being. This platform, for the pros, by the pros, anybody in the performance space, and beyond. Welcome here to share in the stories of professionals, experiences, journeys, learning along the way. It's a platform to connect, to network, and to be a part of a community that cares, with conversations that matter, experiences that resonate, and generate ideas, thought-provoking, organic dialogue, passionate pros. Brought to you as always by First Star Therapy, Mobility Tape, Epic, and Benchmark Athletics. In association with the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. It's First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being a part of it.
Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy roundtable brought to you by First Star Therapy. I'm your host, James Gardner, and this is a platform for the pros, by the pros. Passionate pros, organic dialogue. Let's chat. Thanks for listening. Let's roll.
We are live, session 66, First Star Let's Chat, Athletic Therapy Roundtable. Our guest this evening, Dr. Andrew Robb. As always, First Star Let's Chat is brought to you by First Star Therapy. Mobility Tape, the only heat-activated kinesiology tape on the market. We have Benchmark Athletics as a recent sponsor and Epic, EPOCH, where you can learn to live your epic. Brought to you in association with the Canadian Athletic Therapy Association. We'll jump right in here. I have been looking forward to this conversation since we booked it. Definitely all week just geeking out on this stuff. I'll openly admit that on the air here. For everybody live, you're in for a treat. For everybody picking this up after the fact on the podcast, first off, thank you for tuning in. But secondly, one of the oh man, a mentor, a colleague, a friend, and one of the best in the biz. Dr. Andrew Robb holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Brock University, where he is also a member of the Canadian National Championship baseball team. He went on to graduate from the Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College and eventually postgraduate fellowship from the Royal College of Chiropractic Sports Sciences. Clinical care provided by Dr. Robb includes the administration of advanced assessments, including movement function based approaches and advanced rehabilitative therapeutics. He's been published in various scientific journals in the areas of soft tissue therapy, baseball biomechanics, shoulder injuries, and functional movements. Andrew serves on clinical faculty at the Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College and has collaborated with various organizations, including the Canadian Athletic Coaching Center, American Sports Medicine Institute, and Major League Baseball. Dr. Robb focuses in the area of baseball pitching mechanics, throwing injuries, and sports performance and conditioning. He's a consultant for various baseball organizations and is also involved with Major League Baseball conducting research. Dr. Robb is published in various sports science journals on these topics of baseball injuries and hip function. He's an international lecturer on the topics of arm, hip, baseball-related injury mechanics, and movement sciences. He's lectured at Laurier University, Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College, and Brock University. This is part 3 of 4 of our Tommy John education series. The bio speaks for itself as to why you're here, but I am so grateful for your time. I'll let you say hello and we'll jump in, man.
Hey guys, thanks for having me, James. It's been, a long time, right? For us, it's go back to 2001, 2002 with us. So it's, yeah, man, all that stuff in a nutshell has been like a lifelong journey. So I'm trying to get better, and you know what? I think everyone else listening, they're probably in the same boat. So, I'm excited for this, man. Like, I'm ready to rock.
Yeah, absolutely. We go back to Brock. That's where our overlap was. I think you had finished up playing. You were doing some stuff with the team, and there was some mentorship and some stuff overlap with Jim and Karen and Joe in the clinic there, and then it just kind of happened, and things just kept going, and we've stayed in touch. And I can't even believe it's been that long. But all of the things that you've done in baseball, all of the time that I've spent in baseball, and there's nothing better. We're 4 or 5 days away from opening day, depending on who you're following and where you're coming from. You know, all things given. So not a bad time for this conversation ever. But with opening day coming up, let's talk UCL injury. Let's talk rehab. There's a couple recent ones with the Blue Jays, and none of this. Let's start there. Neither of us have inside information. Neither of us are working with the organization. Anthony Hatch and Kirby Yates both went down recently with injuries, forearm and/or Tommy John UCL injuries. I'll just give you my spin on it, and then let's leave that as a jump off point. I heard Kirby Yates got picked up. I heard through the media. I have no inside information on any of this, but he had a bone spur removed, I think, in the off season. From last season to this season, he was a low risk, quote unquote, pickup. That's a surgery where they just go in and take something out, and then away you go, no problems, according to the media report that I was listening to. And as soon as that was said, it really tipped me off a little bit of an amber flag, with a thrower and a pitcher and a high velocity guy coming out of the bullpen in short bursts. When you take something out of the elbow, what that might lead to, needless to say, a couple months later into spring training, and here we are, Tommy John surgery, out for the season. So not to highlight that's an aha or look what I know, but in the baseball space, there's a lot of things that go into UCL injury, right? And I just want to sort of start with some of your research and some of the things that you've done, and then come back around maybe to sort of this setup during spring training and what we know and what we don't know, in this space. So
Totally. And it's like, here's the key. And a lot of my research was driven on like our days back at Brock and trying to understand, okay, like, is it throwing that actually causes problems, or is there a variety of different factors, right? And there's a famous quote by Jill Cook. She's a prominent researcher in tendon pathology. She coins the term biomechanical tissue overload syndrome. Sort of denoting a constellation of a lot of findings and a lot of sort of variables that go into that overload. And just because it's the elbow and sort of this talk, or for any tissue for that matter, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the problem. It's a lot of time that is a recipient, depending on how you want to define the problem. And one of the things that people got to understand is that the biomechanics provide a good descriptor on how loading is profiled. So a lot of my research was in hip function. And what we did back in 2007, 2008 was, is there a link between hip function and the throwing arm? And we were able to identify that those who had history of problems and or who had hip deficits, they were related. And with that said, that was another variable that you could put into the mix to determine, okay, well, what is this player's problem? What is this elbow really stemming from? And you come to realize that once you start to open up Pandora's box, there's a whole slew of other things. And you start to realize that if the hip starts to go from range or injury, it has implications on the trunk. And if the trunk has problems, it has implications on the shoulder. And then once you have issues in the shoulder, then there's links to the elbow. Here's the reality to that. And it's when you start to delve into the research, those links there that I've just identified may not be causal, but those links show up in all age categories. Mm-hmm. That's like something really fundamental for people to understand when it comes to arm care, is that hip function, rib cage, or thoracic, shoulder, and all have links with throwing at all ages, whether it's increased range, decreased range, and it's if you start to do regression modeling on it, it's relation to overload.
Right.
So that is where you start to look at, from a research standpoint, okay, well, what is the link between all of those, and how does speed and how does force have implications on performance and overload, right? And then you take it a step further and you look at the bigger picture. What does fatigue do to all those variables? Right. So now when you look at fatigue, you got to look at it in a number of different ways. Number one is Is it fatigue because you're in shape and you've pushed yourself as a form of overreaching? Is it fatigue because you're out of shape, which we may get allude to? Is it fatigue because it's inefficient? And then you sort of branch out on that inefficiency of what? Well, inefficiency of the way you move in general, just as a human being, let alone as an athlete. Or is it inefficiency because of the way you train? Because a lot of guys and female athletes as well train that is not appropriate for what they need.
Right.
They get caught up in the hype. They get caught up like, oh, you're a pitcher or you're X, so you have to train this way. And a lot of times that's not the case. And that's where that overload can be a result. The other parts of it as well, let's be honest, like fatigue also kicks in because of age. There's a processing that is diminishing as we sort of advance through age, especially once you start to reach over the age of 30. And all those variables go just beyond just the sport. And that's where I think with my research, it was just like, okay, what's going on here, right? Complete the chain. What's going on from the ground up? And how do they tie in with all the other variables? It's just this matrix of chaos, trying to connect all these dots that is never a straightforward answer. And I think to answer that back to some of the guys with the Jays, with Hatch and Yates, those are not straightforward. Nope. There's a lot 100%. That goes into them. And these are high functioning athletes. And there's a lot more that goes on at that upper echelon than it would be at the developmental level. And that's where it gets really tricky sometimes. And even the best of the best can get fooled, right? Not to say that this is what happened in this case. I'm not saying that, but it's sometimes stuff happens.
Yep.
Right. Just freak incidents and you just don't know why. It's just, unfortunately, like that happens. And you've been in that realm, right? You could do all the best work in the world and you still break down.
Yep. And I think these are critical points that we can look at and sort of, our role is not to be perfect, but our role is to continually move forward in understanding, right? And I think you and I have talked about this at length at multiple points in our lives, and I think more so maybe recently, but understanding who the individual is as well in front of you goes a whole lot further. But maybe even further to that point is having that individual understand who they are might be the key. So before we go down that rabbit hole, because I know this is one that's front and center for you working in the amateur space, which therefore trickles up to that upper echelon, those athletes at those higher levels as well. But fatigue, let's come back around to fatigue. This is one thing that we can sort of put our finger on and say this is almost or as close to a causal relationship to injury as anything else that we've nailed in science, modern medicine. And fatigue comes from so many different factors. And I've worked in the space. I've stepped away from the space. I continually sort of reflect on my time in there, but also for the love of the game, watch the scheduling and these things and this ramped up activity in spring training to get ready for a season. It's the way it's always been done. And I think that there's a little bit of that mentality in sport in general. And a lot of the things that you've touched on in terms of biomechanical overload and tissue strain and fatigue are applicable across every sport. But sticking to baseball and sticking to the UCL, we had Ryan Croton on here months ago when we sort of started having this when he was with the Angels still. And he was talking, Japan and throwers in Japan. And then the throwers come over here and all of a sudden they have UCL surgery, their elbow goes and their training regimen has changed. Are there things again, this isn't, everything, but a lot and you've done a ton of research. Have you looked at sort of that general structure of training in terms of throwing and load, and is spring training the right way to go about it? Does it need to be year round? What does this look like in terms of your opinion or what the science shows sort of with throwers?
So if you start looking at some of the load management science, it can be hit and miss. Yes, right. There's a fatigue variable. One of the things that people have to understand, like before we really delve on things, to put a number to the nervous system and saying this is what it can tolerate, it's at 100, it's at 50, it's at whatever. That doesn't work, right? And from day to day, that capacity or that ability, bandwidth, if you will fluctuate. And I think that I think spring training, the structure of having it in February for 6 to 8 weeks is fine, to be honest with you. And going into a season, it's what athletes do leading up to spring training, what they do during spring training to get ready for a long season, especially some of the more successful teams where they know they go deep into the playoffs and it's more intense baseball. And then what you do with the off season as a result of that, if you only get a short period of time, then it should reflect on how you manage yourself accordingly. And I don't think there's a lot of science to that. I think internally teams have their own models based on how they manage their athletes, like being down with the Diamondbacks, being down with the Jays, around Baltimore. They all have their own systems. So to say this is how Major League Baseball should do it, like that's an unfair statement to make. But like for me, it's like some of the pro guys that I've had, one of my mantras to that is that I want you 80% ready going into camp, right? Because if you go into camp 100%, your nervous system can't sustain that for the next 8 to 9 months, number one. Number two is if you're a rookie or if you're a guy that's trying to fight for a spot, there's a lot more going on for you than some of the guys that are already proven themselves. They have the contract. They don't need to play as much. They can go at their own pace. And I think that also has to play a factor into it. The other part is, and you just take it from a basic training standpoint, is, and I ask a lot of guys, like when they go down, it's like, what is your training that when you go down? Because it should reflect what you're doing currently. Like, what are you progressing yourself into? What's the transferability of the training effects from one to another, so that way you stay healthy? And the bottom line is, how do you stay healthy? Right?
Yeah.
Like as therapists, like your hands are tied sometimes. You're like, man, like this is just going to take time. And you see some guys, they stay on the DL longer than they should. And it's just because if you burn out the system, you burn it out. And I think that's where we're falling into trap of numbers a little bit. We're playing some cybermetrics on injury management a little bit. And I think like if you've been in a therapist for any period of time, you all know that it's just like, you can't predict those timelines.
Yep.
That rate of processing, you cannot predict. And that is one of those things that I spend my time doing. Like I'm trying to determine, okay, what makes you tick? What makes your system responsive, and what rate of responsiveness do you have?
Yeah.
So I can give you some ideas as to what your injury is going to hold.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think those are things that aren't necessarily considered, and even so, like when we talk about the nervous system and bandwidth and it fluctuating, like I think again, this is a whole nother level of thinking, right? Like this is a whole nother way of thinking. We're no longer analyzing pitch count, and like I was always floored by like this round number of 100 being a cutoff point because it was a round number. It's the 10,000 step thing. There's nothing scientific about it other than it's a round number. And it just seems like if I get 10,000 steps, I'm good. If you get to 100 pitches, like look out. But that, yeah, maybe for her, but not for him, you know. And so some of these things have just kind of made their way in and stuck, right? Is that a fair sort of assessment of those things that are sort of regimented in the baseball world?
Absolutely. And part of it too is that, like, I wouldn't say it's a pandemic necessarily, but there's been an increase in arm injuries since the early 90s.
Yep.
And we haven't been able to like really grasp, like, hey, what's the problem? And part of it is, I think science has evolved so much over the last 30 years at an incredible rate. It's a pretty phenomenal time in the sports science realm. But what people need to understand is that the human system hasn't evolved to keep up with that science. Our system hasn't changed much. So we can do some spectacular things, make ourselves run, jump, throw harder, do all these incredible athletic achievements, but our system's finite. Like it can only handle so much. And some people are just, they're the sort of the genetic freaks, if you will, maybe. But at the same time too, though, man, like it's a bit of a conundrum. Like, at the highest level in all of sports, not just baseball, like nobody really has a true grasp, and we're trying. So like 100 pitches, because if you don't, like, there's going to be backlash. So there's some level of prudence, and it's genuine. It's not just trying to like, oh, it's a round number, let's go with it. No, like they're trying to be judicious with it. But at the same time too, though, it's like, how do you monitor? Like I'm a Nolan Ryan fan, man. That man pitched 150 to 175 pitches every game and still threw hard.
Right.
And lasted 26 years. So what happened back then, that doesn't happen now. And then you can sort of look at, okay, well, science has changed and how we develop athletes has changed as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a challenge nonetheless, man.
Yeah, and I think going back to Nolan Ryan is what happened then was Nolan Ryan happened. There aren't too many there aren't too many of him, and it's interesting because we can get to the science and we can over science things, we can under science things. There's definitely obviously, as you pointed out, through without directly saying it, there's an art form to all of this as well, and all of that is that anecdotal piece, that experiential piece, that being there, that understanding the game, that the ebbs and the flows, and we could go down into analytics of anything in terms of how we're approaching the game on the field. But as we come to sort of the UCL and we're talking about the elbow, I think in talking with Mike Frostad before, and then Jesse Litch came on in part 2 and talked about his experience as a pitcher, we're not talking just the elbow. But when we talk the UCL, we have a tiny little ligament that's meant to, be a little bit of a medial restrictor at the elbow, right? With a valgus force, totally. It can handle, a certain number, 64 Newton meters of force, right? In give or take in a cadaveric study, right? So let's talk about the UCL, and it's a tiny little ligament. There's a whole bunch of other things that contribute to it. If we start at the UCL and kind of work outwards, Frosty had touched on it, and a precursor of some flexor or pronator stuff going on, tendonitis first being maybe an amber, if not red light, prior to a UCL, the bone spurs, the olecranon, sort of that backside, or all of these different things, range of motion of the shoulder. There's lots of different things. I want to go in any number of directions here, but let's start at the UCL and kind of work our way out from there.
Okay.
You obviously have a firm handle on what the UCL is and does in the throwing motion. So let's kind of start there, and then work our way out. And then I'd love to kind of move into some good information that we can figure out how to.
So that UCL, a couple of things. The dynamic stabilizer, the muscle that protects it during the throwing motion, flexi-carpi ulnaris.
Yep.
Its function is relevant to elbow flexion. So if you're inside 90, like below 80, or if you're outside of 110, that flexor carpi ulnaris is now exposed, is not covering that UCL. So now that UCL is exposed. So then go backwards on that. So then, well, why would the elbow be increased in flexion or decreased? Is that like a learned, acquired adaptation, or something that's just, okay, I didn't learn properly? And the point of that then becomes two things. One is the flexor-carpi ulnaris and the flexor pronator mass. These are not big muscles. Right. They're not force generators, but we treat them as such. So when they fatigue, they get stiff, they become inflamed, reactive, if you will. There's something else that's overloading them. And you have to look at what is the biggest leverage on that elbow when it comes to the throwing motion. And I'm going to go backwards for you here. Number one is the bicep, because it actually stabilizes that radial head, right? The tuberosity, right? It also, and the other one is obviously with the olecranon, as you alluded to, is the triceps. All right, both of which are highly active, have high EMG activities during acceleration and deceleration phases of the throwing motion. So here's the key to this. When it comes to the throwing motion, like when you rotate the shoulder from a cocked to an accelerated position and then into follow through, the rotator cuff does not rotate the shoulder.
Right.
The leverage, the biomechanically, that does not happen.
Right.
All right. It facilitates joint centration, or keeps the joint centered in the socket while it rotates at high velocities. Right.
Yep.
The primary rotators, right, and the ones that take on the biggest brunt of the loading are actually his bicep, that people don't realize. Bicep does an incredibly a lot of work when it comes to the acceleration phase. Hence the labral tears, number one, but also two, it allows the elbow to remain centrated during acceleration. That's what people forget sometimes. It is a strong muscle group, all right, with the aponeurosis that comes over the flexor pronator mass. So if you have a flexor pronator mass problem, you have a bicep problem, just because of the anatomical relationship by which those two muscles are inherently attaching to each other.
Right.
But then you got to look at, okay, well, what's overloading and why would the bicep become overloaded? During the throwing motion, if your hip shoulder separation are not timed properly, meaning that one's faster than the other, they're synchronous versus asynchronous, then what you end up getting is a more vertical layback position from cocked to accelerated phase. When that happens, what the center of mass at the forearm actually now becomes more vertical towards the hand. So what does that mean? Well, if the center of mass moves up towards the hand during acceleration, that would be like a therapist doing a valgus load on the elbow.
Right.
Right. So I'm just like the valgus test just mimics what you do incorrectly when you throw. That's what the milking maneuver does. Right. You take out tension on the bicep, milking maneuver usually feels a lot easier.
Yep.
So so the key then becomes, well, I need a more horizontal layback. And then there's a lot that goes into that. But the point is, like, if you just stay at that point there, you realize that if I need to rehab that elbow and I have to take pressure off that UCL, all right, to do that, there's a biomechanical component that is really requiring range of motion at that shoulder and the rib cage. All right. So here's the other part to this as well. When you start going backwards on the UCL, because it's only 64 Newton meters of tolerance that it has, right? Dynamically in the throw motion. If the bicep becomes taut, it becomes hypertonic, and the shoulder gets stiffer, its compressive overload is actually due to the rib cage. So in 2007 and then again in 2019, one of the things that they were able to predict through regression modeling and biomechanical studies, 60 to 70% of the ball velocity can be predicted by how fast that trunk moves. Okay, 70% of your ball velocity is not predicted by how fast the hand moves. It's actually predicated on how fast the trunk moves. Right. It's the longest and heaviest mass that controls the most of your center of mass anyways, that will overload shoulder, that subsequently can overload your elbow. So the idea then becomes, well, how do I protect my elbow? How do I manage it if it's injured? I have a flexor pronator mass strain. Well, there's something further up the chain that's a problem. So rib cage then becomes an integral part to your management, right? So because all those muscles in the forearm are too small, way too small to actually tolerate anything. Really, their job is to make sure that when you go into layback, for a guy that throws 95 to 100 miles an hour, that's 40 plus pounds of pressure going through your hand. Right. That's what with the physics of the phenom and Steven Strasberg in the New York Times, right? That's one of the biggest predictors. Like when that arm goes back, that's 40 pounds of pressure yanking down on that hand, which then guess who gets exposed? UCL. It's only exposed if the layback is more vertical than horizontal.
Right.
So then the idea then becomes, well, how do I get an efficient layback through hip shoulder separation? And you got to work down your chain. Does the trunk move properly? Does it time well? Do the hips position it in the right sequence? And am I using my legs properly?
Yeah,
right?
and
like it's a model nonetheless. It's not the only way, but it's just, it gives you an idea of context. Like to your point, like it only tolerates so much. So then what's overloading it?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And sort of coming in here before we jumped on here, we were talking about kids and just picking up the ball and how they can coach themselves better than we can coach them in terms of how to throw, how to ride a bike, how to do these other things. It just begs the question in terms of how do we get good information, quality information to people in the sport space in terms of training, because velocity programs became really sexy, right? Like weighted ball programs became really sexy and then they kind of went away, but they're just hiding behind some other screen. And then like velocity became the term, like everybody's training velocity, exit velocity on hitting, right? But when it comes to throwing, like you better join my velocity program if you want to go to college. And like if we're coaching velocity to be success or the exit point or the point of confirmation that you're going to make it, I think we're barking up the wrong tree, right? In terms of we're going to end up with all kinds of like this pandemic of UCL injuries and Tommy John surgeries is just going to, it's going to explode. It's going to just, they'll get there. Sure. Way to go. Let's pat ourselves on the back for getting humans to throw a baseball, unnatural motion at close to 100, if not above 100 miles per hour. pat ourselves on the back and then watch their elbow explode and never make it back or take a year to get back, 18 months, right? Like where are we at on that in terms of
So
let's go. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
So okay, go with that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
here's my point to this. So the biomechanics, right? We know that hip range and hip velocity, pelvic velocity, dictates how fast the trunk rotates. It's a 2-to-1 ratio for those who are trying to like, hey, how fast should each move? It's about 400 to 600 revolutions per second, and the doubles in the trunk. Here's the key to this: plyo ball programs, weighted ball programs slow the trunk down. Okay, but you're speeding the arm up. Well, guess what? Guess who's speeding up the arm? Rotator cuff, bicep, tricep, because you got to overcome 400 grams, 1,000 grams, right? And you now have kids that have no understanding of what speed acquisition means. And you're running into a biomechanical tissue overload. It's a ticking time bomb. So I spend more time asking kids and coaches and pitching coordinators to pull away from the plyo ball program and get them to do some fundamental throwing development programs. Understand how to throw properly. You actually threw well once upon a time, better than coaches did. So we got to get you back to that naturally and what your arm slot was, and teach you what you were actually doing in the first place. Right. I spend more time doing that than anything else, because you're right. Kids will figure it out. I've got a huge advantage right now. I'm teaching my son, his 8U team, how to throw a baseball. Not even. I'm actually just giving them some constraints and some drills. And I also have college players trying to do what my 8-year-olds are doing.
Beautiful.
And it honestly, like, here's the key to this. You're supposed to lead the elbow through acceleration. Horizontal adduction is one of the strong predictors at the shoulder that actually influence less floating on the elbow and ball velocity, right? It's a small contribution in the whole covariance of analysis. But the whole point is, an 8-year-old, when they learn to move, the pedagogy of throwing, they naturally throw their elbow.
Yeah.
They do it instinctually.
Yeah.
But you have a 16, 18 college guy having no concept of that. And they're like, what? You want me to, what? I'm doing what with my elbow? Yeah, because that's what you did once upon a time. And that's natural motion. Right. And I think that's the part there, to your point on things, is that we've gone so far with these sexy programs and it's all about velocity that we forgot the basics.
Yeah.
And it's really, we got to go back to that. And because otherwise, like, as therapists, what are you rehabbing when they go back? Like, what are you going, okay, we got the elbow, it's less pain, it's healing. What are you going back to now? If you don't know what you were going back to in the first place, what are you rehabbing? Yeah. Right. And that's the part there where I was like, okay, no. Biomechanics gives us a good template. Let's start to now figure out what that natural movement is first. I do that all my college guys at UW at Waterloo. We are sitting there, I'm teaching them, and it's arduous just to break down some of those mental barriers on this is what throwing actually is. Because when you're on the mound, you can actually go back to, I'm like, oh yeah, like, you know, I'm delayed on my elbow, or I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. You can make those corrections on your own, because I can't do that from the bench, nor can I do it on the mound for you, right? So, and I think that's where that better information is, that I think that we're caught in, especially in Ontario, I can speak to, baseball has become an industry. It's less about a sport, it's less about the game and an activity, and it's about talent development and less about athletic and skill development. Right. And you really use those development categories strongly, because we're just pushing kids. And my analogy, and for everyone listening, these sexy programs that have been alluded to are essentially like cramming and sort of pulling an all-nighter for a test. I need to get a 90 on this test, so I'll do whatever I got to do to get that. That's what plyo balls and some of these other velo programs are doing, because you cannot sustain a velo program 12 months of the year. Yeah, there's no way. Right. You know what I mean? And then the nervous system crashes, the tissue breaks down, and then you get into Bernstein's whole spectrum on sort of how function works, and then it's all chaos from there.
Yeah. So some really good information that I hope makes its way back to where it needs to get to.
Yes.
It must be like running into I don't know, a wall on a regular basis trying to get this home, because athletes are doing what they've been taught by the best people. I've gotten to this point, so like, who are you to tell me that I've been doing it wrong? And that's tough as well. Like in the Major League Baseball and college and these kinds of things, until you can break through or until they get hurt, and then it's too late. And then it's like, okay, well, now we're going to use this rehab. And maybe that's the advantage of
Yes.
having Tommy John, right? Like once you get Tommy John surgery, now you have 12 to 18 months to overhaul. Like, let's overhaul the things that caused the injury and not just wave the ultrasound wand over the incision site and ta-da, like your UCL is better because it's your palmaris longus or it's your hamstring.
Yeah.
It's correcting for all of that. So it takes me back as well. Like this first summer back here, since moving back to Canada, I had an opportunity to go and coach 6-year-olds, not my own, because I don't want any part of coaching my own, but just coaching kids. And it was, again, in relative proximity to the conversation I'd had with Ryan Croton. And it was like, how would you teach kids? And we got into this conversation. It's like, you don't need to teach them. Just like, let them throw on the run. Let them throw and move. Let them throw with, like, they're going to do it inherently. They're going to do it the way that they're going to do it. And it's probably a whole lot better than coaches who think like, let's get them to this position and then we'll do this and then we'll do this and then we'll do this, which are, okay, I guess. But like, how do we overhaul this in terms of getting this information to people so that they can understand that, like, this is where I come to, it comes to a head for me, is like coming back to Ontario and looking at the state of things and seeing how in your face the cramming is, the
Oh
velocity.
yeah.
And like, you'll get to sign your name on this wall if you hit 90 miles per hour at 16. And it's like, well, how many 16-year-olds need to get to 90 miles an hour? Like, and then the second part to that would be, how many are going to sustain that beyond, their first or next injury? Where do we go? Like, this is a great platform because we get to talk about it. You're an expert. Like, you are dealing with the material, the information, the science, the athletes that this is relevant to. How do we drive people into this space?
You know what? And for me, that's is like one of my sort of goals professionally, is that I stay immersed in, obviously, in dialogue such as this, but also too, like at the coaching level. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm at the 8U level. Like I'm coaching, I'm giving that instruction, and I'm leaving them alone. I've made all the mistakes. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sort of holier than thou. Like, trust me, I've like made enough of my mistakes coaching wise. But I also get to see it at the UW level as well, and some of my college guys. Like I get to reverse engineer it and then engineer it going forward.
Right.
But I think also too, it's that like there's conferences, like there's great thinkers out there now, especially in the medical science, sports science realm. There's some great thinkers, there's some great topics, and I think that that's where collectively we need that world to bring it down to the coaching level,
Yep.
bring it down to the associations, because it's like what's happening is, and I'm seeing it, is the sports science world is advancing at an exponential rate, but the coaching world and these grassroots levels are not keeping up. They are 5 to 10 years behind at the best of times. And if you go too far, they think, man, this guy's crazy. He's just like, he's out there. And the idea is like, no, it's not. But it's just like, you got to realize, people, like the general population are not on the same wavelength just yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it does take time. And I think that on our end, to your point, James, is that we can't force feed it on people, because
100%.
then what you end up doing is that it goes on deaf ears. So it's got to be tactful, but also too, there are people out there that can champion that approach. And I think that it's out there. It's just, we're hung up right now on social media with guy that puts his name up on the board. I just threw 90. I'm part of that club.
Yep.
I get it. It sells, but it also provides opportunities for therapists to earn an income.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And it's my mantra, like, and everyone knows it in my region. I don't want you on the table. Whatever I can do to minimize you having to come in, let's do it. Like athletes, you wanted to be fixed yesterday, right? Not tomorrow. So let's make sure that doesn't happen, so you're not in here tomorrow. And coaches they're buying into that. Like parents don't want to be spending more time than necessary going around to now therapy appointments. because
Yeah.
they're already doing a lot as it is for competition. So it's just a matter of like, how do we reconcile the science world with the general population and coaching? It's a big endeavor. And I think that I mark my words, if we go too far with the science, we leave people behind. And unfortunately, or fortunately, the internet has allowed us to access a lot of information, and we are leaving groups behind.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to harness that a little bit more. And it's the PSOs and some of the national sporting bodies, they really got to help step in and really start to bring that down, not oversimplify it, but come and bring everything up to terms.
Yeah.
So that way we can create a new generation, and go from there. Like, it's a complex issue, and it's like one that I grapple with, and you do as well. And you got to work with it, not fight it, and not beat a drum down too much, but still persist and stay true to the word.
Yeah, well said, 100%. So some amazing stuff. And speaking of those conferences, we'll opt for a little plug here with the RCCSS conference coming up. Throw it on April 18th next month. You're going to be speaking at that. I have the opportunity to play setup man to you as the closer, I think. So we'll let you come in and wrap that up. But put on by the Royal Chiropractic College of Sports Sciences, April 18th again, and there's no selflessness here and no selfishness here, other than they've asked me to speak through my experience working in the Blue Jays organization and in baseball, and Dr. Robb will be there as well, and that's I think it's a Saturday, I believe, and no, Sunday, a Sunday. Is it?
Sunday.
Anyway,
yeah,
Sunday, and a full day conference with some really great speakers. And if this one's of interest to you, that one will certainly be of interest to you with the lineup that they have for that. So check them out. And then coming back around to sort of all of the things that we've touched on, good information, getting information at the grassroots level. Can we walk through sort of how you navigated to where you're at, to getting to Major League Baseball? I think it's really interesting for people to hear about your career and sort of, playing at Brock and then navigating to that. We'll jump off the UPL for a minute and just sort of take us through your navigation.
So long story short, I go to Brock University. I want to play baseball. I still think I have an opportunity, right? Like that every 19-year-old's ambitious dreams, right? I show up, I think I'm a third baseman. And the coach at the time says, do you pitch? I'm like, yeah, okay, go over there. So I became a pitcher. And not having a clue what the hell I was doing. I was athletic. I threw okay. It's, everyone thought I had pretty good mechanics, but it didn't translate. I couldn't get more speed, right? I maybe topped out maybe 80, just over, but I had good mechanics. But I will tell you, my arm killed. My elbow, oh man, it was the bane of my existence. No matter what I did, no matter what I took, it always hurt. And I'm training, like off season, I would train. Things didn't work out. I don't make the team the next year. My summer team thinks I'm an outfielder. And so I think, okay, I suck as a pitcher, quote unquote. But then I'm starting to learn in kinesiology, like, man, like maybe I can figure things out. So I expand my academic career, go off to the Chiro College, understand more about the body and how it works, go into my sports specialty. And I'm really like, okay, I want to figure this out now. Like, I want to carve some ground on the topic area of arm injuries. So I started investigating hip function as it pertains to arm injuries. Why hip? As I told Fleissig, the model was me. I had a really bad hip. My flexibility was poor. I did a lot of work. I worked out hard, but it didn't match what I needed, and I didn't do the work that I should have done. And so we started to link, okay, poor hip function and altered mechanics based off the prototype. So that takes off, and we're starting to see a good link there. It had never been done before, and this is going back to 2000, 2008.
Amazing.
We knew so much for 20 years from the pelvis up, but nothing below the pelvis, which is now hip down to the foot. So, and then since then, that topic exploded, and hip became a prominent sort of variable. It got picked up by the New York Times with the physics of a phenom, and hip being part of that sort of spectrum on understanding how does somebody throw as hard as they do. Here's the key to this. Biomechanics only provided a certain aspect because 2 weeks after that article came out, his UCL went.
Right.
So just because you understand the biomechanics doesn't necessarily mean you have all the answers.
Right.
And this blew up, and it was probably a great thing at the time. I was just like, I was mortified. But anyways, one thing led to another, and then still kept in contact with FlySig, doing my thing at the grassroots level, trying to give back. So all the research I did and things I got exposed to with FlySig at the ASMI in Birmingham, Alabama, I give back to the grassroots. Like, this is not for me to keep and for my own sort of career. I want to give it back to the kids. And word got out. So I got an opportunity to go down to the Diamondbacks. They were intrigued with some of the hip stuff I had been doing. We started doing some functional testing, trying to correlate it with either injuries, performance, and came to realize very quickly that when it comes to functional testing, there's not a lot of good insight. People got to understand functional testing. It's like doing research studies. If you have the right question, it can work out well. If you don't have a good question, you're trying to answer injury, doesn't work. Anyways, word got out from the Jays. They were intrigued with some of that concept and some of the trunk, and I had an opportunity to work with one of the guys that they used to have in their organization, Alex Nolan, and working with him and understanding sort of at the highest level what you needed. They were pleased with the work that we were doing, right? Just to get him to that next level, because you're taking a Canadian kid at the OUA level, Canadian baseball level, and still competing at the highest level. So, and it was just based on like staying true to the science and being innovative with what's out there. And the key to that for some of the young scholars out there listening is that you've got to expand your knowledge base beyond just anatomy and physiology. You got to look into coaching science, movement science, neurophysiology, tissue injury, but also to understanding just the human dynamic. And that was the one element that, has really allowed me to advance through the baseball world, is not just be a chiro and a sport chiro at that. It's just being able to have conversations on multiple levels with people, and bolstering my skill set, but also understanding where I stand with everyone, and also knowing and being humbled. We've talked about this, man. Having the sort of the courage to say, I don't know.
Yep.
And my pursuit of knowledge is my superpower. Like, I don't know, and I'm going to research to the nth degree just to figure things out and make connections, so that way I understand, and then go from there.
Yeah, what an amazing career and an amazing share, and not luck of the draw, and it didn't just happen out of nowhere. And I want to be Dr. Andrew Robb. Like, there were some struggles along the way. There's a lot of time and time away, time navigating some things, and getting to where you are now and sharing this with us. So again, appreciate you being here and sharing this little bit of your story and the research, obviously, and that article that came out with Steven Strasberg, and then the 2 weeks later blowing out his UCL, brought me to that thought of was it Tom House, who wrote a book called Saving the Pitcher, and his poster boy was Mark Pryor, and Mark Pryor had never been hurt when that book came out, and this was one of the first guys to throw in the high 90s on a regular basis. And then if you went through his collection of injuries through his career, he just about got run over by a truck as it went through, and there was no saving him at the end of his career. I think he ended up actually signing with the Blue Jays at one point towards the end of his career, and just trying to revive it. But interesting, there is no perfect program. There is no perfect science behind it. There is bits and pieces that work. There is definitely that human element. I had some great conversations in the baseball space with some of the greatest people in the baseball space, and they weren't into science. They were using their eyeballs, and they were using the old eyeball test, and this is how we scout, and this is what we're looking for. And I just remember sitting at the batting cage one day, and one of the hitting instructors has been in the game for longer than I've been alive, I think, was like, tell me about biomechanics of hitting. And I was like, what you want to learn about? What? I don't even know what that means. means. Like I'm not going into this trap. I don't know where it's going. But as spring training went on, it became a daily topic of discussion, and he wanted to sort of be brought up to speed in terms of what biomechanics was and what it was looking at, and like, can I hit off the backside or do I need to hit off the front side? Like, what's science telling you? Because here's what my experience is telling me as a coach and a scout for years and years and years. So some really amazing stuff in the game. I'm looking forward to the season for sure, seeing some baseball again. But just jumping back to sort of the injury realm and the UCL again. This is part 3 of 4 of our Tommy John series, an educational series on elbow injuries in the throwing athlete. We had Mike Frosted on, who very very well. We had Jesse Litch on as well. Prior to Jesse coming on, he had Greg Zahn on here, and it wasn't talking about the UCL, but one thing that he touched on was like, from the time he was playing to the time that he got his first injury or first surgery, he was pretty much a clean slate. And then after he had that first surgery, coincidental timing or not, it was a spiral from there. Jesse Litch, same thing. He had Tommy John, and he's had 9 surgeries after that. His career ended obviously at 5 years. And is there something to be said for that in terms of, not that surgery ends careers or that surgery leads to more surgery, but I don't know, maybe it highlights the fact that when we get surgery, we're fixing tissue, right? But we're not necessarily correcting for the issue that led to that tissue damage. And that brings it back full circle to where you started, with biomechanical overload.
Yeah. And you know what, like, here's the key with that, and with those injuries, especially with the older athlete, is that if you've never been hurt before, mentally, how do you deal with it?
Mm-hmm.
You can't answer that question until you're hurt. Like, everyone likes to think, oh, I'll do this, like I'd be mentally resilient. I agree with that, but you don't know that until it happens.
Right.
Because then you don't realize what you've lost.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And part of it too is, just because you've never been hurt, you've got a clear slate, doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually you're offsetting injury by doing the right things. Maybe you've been fortunate and you've been lucky. And maybe it's just like you've been gifted with some durable anatomy, or your development has allowed you to be that durable and resilient that eventually wore thin at the highest level.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's 2 things that I tell athletes all the time on this topic is, number one, you want to be injured early in your career prior to anything of significance, because it then develops you mentally. The psychological profiling of what injury is, number one. Number 2 is, you're not a complete athlete until you've actually been injured. And why? Why I say that, and this is a personal opinion here, is that you actually appreciate what you've lost, and understanding that, okay, like, I can't play. And then mentally now deal with that. Because a lot of guys really struggle with that concept. Like, do you know how hard you need to work now to get back to where you were, and then play at an equal or even higher level than what you've been, right? You look at all the Tommy John literature, right? And it shows promising. But if you look at some of the injuries, like some of these guys, these arm injuries have been there plaguing their careers. Like, they've been chasing this. So when they finally have to have the surgery, like, hey, finally, I can get this done with. I'm having surgery. I can move on.
Yeah.
Other guys, it's the first time, and it's a struggle, or a true struggle. And the ones I worry about are the ones late in their careers. Like, can they come back to form? Like, they're aging, like Verlander, for example, right? He's really late in his career, right? What's he going to look like? I'm excited. I'm a big fan of his, right? Versus a guy it happens when he's in AA. Right. And it's like, it's a different mindset, different motivation. And it comes down to, like, is it the seal broken when you've had surgery? Maybe. Right. But at the same time too, though, yeah, for some guys, like, there was a lot of things you weren't dealing with. And if you have more than one surgery, there are things you're not dealing with. And part of it too, with training, you have to train to your age, not just your sport, not just your position. Like, if you are 25, there's a level of training that you need to put in, versus if you're 31.
Right.
You can't train like a 25-year-old, right? And Tom Brady has probably been the epitome of that. Like, a lot of athletes, like, you have to evolve with your age and understand, what does age do to you as you pursue and advance through your career.
Yeah.
And I think that is a topic that's not talked about a lot. Range declines, muscle strength, power, all these things decline in baseball players. Some guys start to peak later on in their careers.
Mm-hmm.
But how many guys are addressing the fact that, okay, I'm 21 right now. How do I pitch till I'm 36, 37, 38? What does that roadmap look like? Because it's going to be different every year potentially. And that's where the realm I'm in, where I try to take guys, okay, this is what you are now. This is what you're going to look like with age. We know certain variables with age.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're having surgery, clear slate, you've got to start over with that training. You can't do the same things as you were previously doing. No way. Right.
Yeah. Well, listen, I love that you're going down this hole. I think we could be here for hours and hours and hours, but you're saying you and your career, and you need to know that. Like you're teaching athletes that they need to know themselves and they need to push for this, because when we're in the role of being in the training room and in a reactive space most of the time, because your 21-year-olds have been throwing baseball since they were 3, and they've been with different college coaches and they've been with different people, or your 35-year-olds have been throwing a certain way, and it has to be a little bit reactive in nature, because you can't front load guys that have been throwing for that many years. So what do? You intervene where you can, but it's not an overhaul at that point. So an interesting topic maybe for another day is providing access to athletes to understand who they are. And I think that there's a lot of good stuff. You've touched on the nervous system, which I think is obviously critical. You've touched on fatigue, and you just touched on it again, coming back around to surgeries and injuries and all these different things, and the psychological component, because that's fatigue that is not even understood, nor is it quantifiable. And I think that weighs on the system.
So real quick on the fatigue side, study just came out in the last couple of months. They were looking at cognitive fatigue, and they were looking at bench press. Real simple, right? It was an S&C study. Basically, they induced cognitive fatigue, and EMG activity of the primary movers of that pressing motion were dropping 10 to 15%. So mental fatigue, cognitive fatigue contributes to the overall fatigue profile. So what you bring into the activity, right? Whether it's domestic, whether it's life, whether it's, you pick it, depression, the mental component, which is a huge facet that we got to address these days, does contribute, right? This is not just physical, going to the weight room, I got to do things better. No, this is the person, right? And that study really hallmarked, it's not a baseball study. It just goes to show you how variable the system is and how integrated multiple subsystems are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I don't know, again, we could spend days, and I look forward to the conference and hearing those other speakers and hearing you again and connecting again here now that we're back in Canada. But, in the minor leagues and major leagues and maybe in the teenage years now, we talk about saving bullets and doing different things and not throwing too much. And the one piece of advice that I give, here back in Ontario in these spaces is that there's a ton of ways to train throwers without throwing a baseball, because I think like throwing a baseball is the last thing that throwers need to do at 12 and 13 and 14 and 15, at least in mimicking what the big leaguers are doing, because they are not little big leaguers. They are human beings with growth plates that are not formed, with movement literacy that is not complete or anywhere near it. I'd love to get into sort of movement literacy and variability and movement and all these other things that we could, because I know these are things that like we need to get into. So we'll come back around to this another time. We'll have you back on. We're approaching an hour here, and again, really appreciate it. I know you got the kids in bed and lots to do this week and all those other things. So I'll thank you. Dr. Andrew Robb is our guest tonight, session 66, which is part 3 of 4 of our Tommy John series. We're trying to hook Drew Hutchison, who is still navigating a professional pitching career, to get here for session 4 of 4, hoping, fingers crossed, that he'll be on that Tigers roster as spring training exits. But we'll get him on here at some point to wrap this thing up. But hey, Rob, man, this has been phenomenal. I have pages and pages of notes. We got a whole bunch of people pouring thank yous in here, and everybody's here. Everybody's picking this up after the fact. Thank you so much, and please reach out.
Thank you.
Dr. Robb, Dr. AROBB@gmail.com if you want to get a hold of them. It's been absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to do more on this topic and everything else. And just before I say bye and wrap up completely, reminder, Friday, we have a special session, another educational series, Women in Sports. That one will go live here on Zoom at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll be up on the podcast the next 3 Fridays. That's Women in Sports. Next Sunday, really special guest as well, as they all are. Ryan Metzger is a strength and conditioning coach. She is down at Clemson University. She'll be on next Sunday. So 2 this week coming up, but this one's been great. Andrew Robb, thank you, man. I'll let you, as always, I'll play setup man and you play closer. Thanks for being here.
Man. You can only close a great starter.
Beautiful. Well played, man. A pleasure.
Right, I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much, guys. All right.
Good night.
Night.
Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this community. Check us out online, firststartherapy.com. That's FIRSTAR therapy.com. Or email us with feedback, consult@firststartherapy.com. CONSULT@firststartherapy.com. On Instagram @firststar.therapy, and our podcast host @letschat.at. This is First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast.